probably 10 years. And I live in Seattle. I had a family, I'm widowed. I'm a grandfather, great-grandfather, etc. So that's just my profile of me. Presently.
Stands.
Yeah.
Twice before, we've been here, and one of them was right after a police car was set on fire, and the group that sponsored Mark and I to come and talk was banned, and the lecture that we were to give was canceled. We went ahead and did it anyway, and campus police came in to try and shut it down, and they got the mood of the place and split, and we went ahead and did our event. It was very nice.
Yeah.
So are we going to give it a few more minutes or what?
Yeah, a few more minutes. I want to make some announcements.
Okay, that's fine.
Welcome everyone. We have a bunch of, so this is like, tomorrow we have an event at the Flame 89 Cafe. It's going to be an open mic thing, and it's basically an intro to like, there's going to be a mass incarceration art exhibit in the student gallery in the ACAP building from 24th to May 2nd. And so tomorrow night is the kickoff, and people are going to talk about it. And so that's at 5 tomorrow night at the Mead Mark Cafe. Tomorrow? Oh, what is it? It's a kickoff to this art exhibit that's going to be happening at the Student Art Gallery from April 24th to May 2nd. It's all about mass incarceration. It shows the process of how people get bundled into the system, conditions inside prison, and what it's like for people to get out, and all the discrimination they face. And it has a lot of art submissions from prisoners too. So I would really check it out. The kickoff's tomorrow night. And then we have a bunch of events in May that I encourage you to keep an eye out for. So, yeah. Oh, and we also asked for no flash photography. And yeah. Any other questions? Cool. See you later. Yeah. Oh yeah, the press is here, so anything you say may be recorded.
It is being recorded.
Okay, well, let me kick this off by getting in the Wayback Machine back to a time before the prevalent fear that people experience today and the atomization that goes on, back to a time when there were actually hippies. This is a time when there was a revolution that had taken place in Nicaragua, revolution ongoing in El Salvador, Mozambique, Angola. The United States was on the verge of a humiliating defeat in Vietnam. There were armed groups in the United States from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. The idea that was that all of these groups would develop and grow, and at some point come together to be the broom that would sweep U.S. imperialism into the dustbin of history. We were part of such a group in the Seattle area, one of two groups in the Seattle area. There were also groups in Los Angeles, multiple groups in the Bay Area, of course, and a whole lot of other people, a whole lot of other places. We felt that that it was a form of American exceptionalism for people around the world to be fighting and dying in the struggle against U.S. imperialism, while we here at home confined our feeble protests to methods within the context of bourgeois legalisms. I'm sure you've all been at demonstrations where, there's marshals that make sure that you don't set a garbage can on fire or, some other horrendous act of terrorism. So that was the context in which the brigade was formed. We did approximately 20 bombings. We financed ourselves by robbing banks. I don't know. Mark, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, of course, just prior to this revolutionary movement, I guess the Panthers, or the Black Panthers, and it had to do mostly with the conditions of the ghetto, the living conditions, health conditions, lack of labor. And so the Panthers were formed to rectify some of this stuff. We started free clinics, freedom schools for the youngsters, what they call TESC now. And we, what's called, patrolled the police, followed them, and I gave advice to people on the streets what they had to say, what they were required to do and not to do. And because we got a lot of hassles from the police. And our interest in helping the communities at that time kind of were diminished by the attack the police laid on us. We spent a lot of time fighting them physically and politically, how they were interfering with a lot of things that we were doing. Okay. I was formed a Panther group within the walls of Washington State Penitentiary as a first prison chapter of the Black Panther Party. And of course we did some work in there. The work is different than what was going on out on the streets. It's mostly, I was a lieutenant of information, so I educated them based on the Black Panther paper that came in and other materials they sent in to me. So that was my job. And we were able to join with other prisoners in a pretty spectacular strike, work strike that changed the nature of Washington State prisons for quite a while. When I got out, I came to Seattle to hook up with the Panthers, but most of them had left Seattle and gone to Oakland to be bodyguards and, for Elaine Brown and part of the Oakland administrative body. And so I worked on other programs. The one I was most fond of was setting up a business with some ex-prisoners, 4 other ex-prisoners, and it was built to hire prisoners coming out of prison. Some were in halfway houses, and to build a job critique, a resume for them so we can get them out of there into the mainstream workforce. So that was my favorite thing. While I was doing that, I also helped form a convention. It was a prisoner forum. This is for prisoners about the conditions in prison, outside of prisons. And we actually invited prisoners to come, who were in prison, and we did get them. They came from prison, escorted by guards. There were judges, and a lot of people from the community came to these things. So this is kind of the real beginning of my work at Seattle. And at I think it was the first convention, I met Ed Mead along with some other people, and got into broader politics, broader than just being ethnocentric, just being black, so to speak. We found during the Black Panther movement that we trusted each other more than we trusted outside community, even though we had a lot of informants within the black community that helped to undermine the work that we were doing. But I'm going to stop right here because, the George Jackson Brigade was set up by Ed and some other people. I came in on the tail end of it. At the time of this revolutionary movement that was going on, a lot of groups existed. Some were pacifist, some were very aggressive. But we all were under, in a sense, the same flag, so to speak, that we want to change. We're trying to figure out how to go about making it. We learned about the strengths and weaknesses of forming such groups. And as we get into it, I'll tell you about one of the weaknesses. Well, I'll tell you about one of the weaknesses that I think is fundamental to groups keeping the mobility of groups going.
Okay. When I mentioned about, the old days and the atomization and fear that exists today, I need to give you a little example of what things were like back then. And that is, there was a demonstration, I lived in Seattle, there was a demonstration taking place in Buffalo, New York, in support of the Attica brothers, prisoners who had taken over the Attica prison. And anyway, you probably know more about than I do. Anyway, to get to this demonstration, I hitchhiked to San Francisco and to Buffalo, New York. I think the trip took, 3 or 4 days, not very long. And there was a whole community of people that hitchhiked everywhere. I mean, it was just, men and women, boys and girls. I mean, that was just an alternative. These days, you go to an on-ramp or an off-ramp and you see beggars. In those days, you would see hitchhikers traveling around the country, going places. And it was just the fear. So I got arrested as a result of my participation in George Jackson debate events and was sent to prison and for almost 20 years. Like Rip Van Winkle, when I went in, there were hippies that were, selling beads and whatnot. But there wasn't the wide-scale poverty that exists today, and there wasn't the isolation that people experience today. Now, back when we were doing the brigade, we risked our lives and long prison terms because we felt that conditions were so intolerable that we would rather die than see them continue like this. And to come out 20 years later and to see things even far, far, far worse and people accepting it. You've all heard the story about the frog in the cold water that gets, I don't think that's true, but the analogy seems to be there, that this sort of thing just has kind of creeped up on you with television, cop shows everywhere, the surveillance, everything is, it's just, causes me to wonder, where people are at these days. That things could degenerate to such a point that one of my previous visits here was right after Obama was elected president, and I asked in the audience who had voted for Obama, and almost all the hands went up. And I said, well, you certainly have something to tell her in time. And are you up on him, Obama, killing American citizens overseas without, and he's a constitutional scholar. There's one loudmouth in Yemen who, there's no evidence that he did anything other than be a loudmouth. And he's killed along with everybody in his car. His 16-year-old kid from California, 3 weeks later, came to visit him. And he was killed, along with everybody in his car. I mean, it just, people being, it's really, really gotten bad. And, what's up? I mean,
We couldn't rely on government to give us the minimal needs that we needed, just a guarantee, fair and clean housing, and food, and medical, etc. I remember the day we were up here when you brought up Obama's name, and I said, well, we got our scalawag in here now. And I knew that's what it was going to be, because politicians are all the same. They slide from one side to the other, getting what, whatever ever interest they can congeal with somebody else, you know, they can just move back and forth. Never trust a politician or a preacher, excuse me on that. Well, like you said, there was a lot of fear back then. I mean, there wasn't much fear. There was fear. And there was a fear in a black neighborhood that all whites, in a sense, were out to get us. And we had to show them that it was the people, that it was the government, not them, and that there were money interests in the government that were driving the government to keep us where we were, keep us down to low wages, you know, and keep us out of politics. They needed constituents they could trust. But at that time, there was kind of a democratic fervor that was going all over America. You know, poor whites and Indians and blacks and everybody decided that government just isn't treating us fair. They're looking out for the rich man, they're not looking out for us. And the wars we got into were in the interest of these big companies that were making all the war machines. To this day, they're still making war machines. They're pulling out of countries and leaving old equipment behind, destroying it, making more war machines. But that's our money. The way these rich people get rich is through our taxes. You always see them raising taxes. And all that money goes to those rich people. It gives us a little bit. You know? It might give us a smaller bus fare. But it's not, it's helping them more than it's helping us. And when they give us not a smaller bus fare, but a bigger bus fare, that money is going to them, the people who make the buses. It's a strange fight that we're fighting. We were fighting back then, and that you're going to have to fight in the future. And there's a lot of risks in entering into that fight. The risks have to do partly with your reputation, and maybe they'll lock you up a couple times. There's high risk in trying to fund yourself. If you can't have a steady job and the money you have going into your group, you know, if you can't fund it, then maybe you decide, oh, we'll try and do some expropriations from banks. That's high risk too. There's political prisoners locked up to this day because of the going that way. That's one of the reasons Ed and I got locked up. It's a high risk job to do this, but I mean, you need funding. Money talks and bullshit walks. I don't care how you say it or who it applies to. You need money, you need funding to keep a movement going. And like I say, whether it's a peaceful movement or an underground movement, you still need funding, some kind of funding. And all power to you if you want to try the old way of the expropriations, but they're high risk and you better know those risks before you step into it. Don't whine when they end up giving you the 2 life sentences, 10 years or 30 years, all on top of each other. And that's what I got. And lucky to get out. I don't know if it's lucky because I'm out here and I want to do things, but I'm in a sense too old to get into it. And things have mellowed down here so much. There's not that energy that was in the whole communities like it was back then, where people wanted to help each other, where they wanted to push on the government, when you had 100,000 marching in the street, you know, behind a war, behind an issue. But I'm an advocate because that's where my politics started, in prison. I know the conditions of prison, that they're bad then and they're worse now. So I'm an advocate for prisoners, and when they cry for help and will stand up for themselves, I'll help them. And that's why I'm working with Ed with the California prisoners. They stood up for themselves, and they say they're going to do it their way, but if you guys want to help us, step in. And we stepping in to help them, but they're going to do it whether we help them or not. I carry the nightmares. I mean, every night I go to bed, kind of scared to go into sleep because I know I'm going to have those nightmares about being locked in prison, can't get out. And that's common. Ed has them. We talk to other people who have been in prison long term. We have them too. They don't call it PST because we're prisoners, ex-prisoners, because that's what it is. You know? So when you step into the stuff, I'm just telling you, it is high risk, but it's worth it. And the U.S. is going to go just like the Roman Empire went, like the Egyptian Empire went. You know, they lasted hundreds and thousands of years, but they disappeared. You know, our U.S. government's going to go the same way. It's going to disappear eventually. And something else is going to come up. But while it's here, let's make it ours and make it do what we want to do. The society, I'm not talking about just the government, I'm talking about the total society. People, I want people to live together. I'm tired of hearing about the Jewish ghettos, the black ghettos, or the barrios, you know, trailer parks. Let's just live together, but do it in an aggressive way.
I'll tell you how I'll talk a little bit about how the brigade got going. We engaged in mass protests, you know, went to demonstrations, and one demonstration in particular, the police had just killed some black youth in the central district of, which is a black neighborhood in Seattle. And now they were asking the city council for permission to use dum-dum bullets. That's hollow point, hollow nose bullets. And we were just really against this, that you know, and we had torches, lit a fire, and marching, you know, down to the city hall and doing all that. But whatever we did didn't seem to have a lot of impact. I mean, it just didn't. I remember I lived in San Francisco here a while back, and we had a demonstration of almost 150,000 people against the war that we were getting ready to kick off in Iraq. And there were 9 million people around the world who had protested against that war, and of course, nothing happened. And at that demonstration, as like most of them, there were the marshals there to keep you from tipping over a trash can. In any event, in the Central District of Seattle, there was a lot of construction going on. And the construction companies were all owned by whites, and they all employed white workers. So you have white workers doing all the construction work in the black community, and the United Construction Workers was an organization of black construction workers who thought this was not fair. And so they started protesting. And the community, the progressive community in Seattle, joined them in protests. And so these are the kind of protests where we wear ski masks and break out of the crowd, run into the construction site, tear up as much stuff as we could, and run out again and melt into the crowd. Some people were arrested. My particular group was never arrested. So this kind of escalated and escalated. One night we entered into one of the construction areas and poured sand and dirt into the gas tanks and the oil filler thingies. And there was a lowboy, it's a truck that carries a Caterpillar on it, and we siphoned the fuel oil out of the Caterpillar and lit and destroyed that truck and the Caterpillar at the same time. And still that wasn't enough. And so what we did was we made Molotov cocktails. This was the first act of what would become the George Jackson Brigade. And we firebombed the offices of one of the racist contractors. Nobody was ever caught, no communique was issued or anything like that. But when it came time for those people to go to trial, who had been arrested on the construction site for protesting, property destruction, whatever, the contractor was called as a witness and said that he wouldn't testify because he said he'd had enough trouble with these people and he's not going to testify. So all the protesters went free. That was an example of how mass struggle and armed struggle worked hand in hand to accomplish specific political goals. The reaction of the community to the firebombing and to the release of these people from trial was a positive one. And so we decided to go ahead and you know, try something bigger. And so what we did is we gave various reasons for leaving our communities and got a place in, I don't know if you're familiar with Seattle or not, but there's an industrial area called Georgetown. And we got a place in Georgetown, and we just started moving underground. Where nobody knew where we went. We'd give cover stories or whatnot. At the time, this came about right after the prisoners at the Washington State Penitentiary had taken over sections of the prison in an effort to keep their self-government. They had a program there called 50-50, in which the prisoners had 50% of the power and the administration had 50% of the power. It didn't, well, Mark can tell you more about that. He was there during the period. But anyway, the administration shut the program down after some years of it being quite successful. If somebody was high on Pruno, for example, drunk, friends would take him to the hole and he'd sleep it off. Would take him to his cell and he'd sleep it off. There's no infractions. There's no, let him out the next morning. Everything's, people handled things like this on as they should have. Well, the administration tried to shut down the program, and in December of 1974, they seized sections of the prison and took hostages in an effort, after telling the administration that if you don't allow us to have our government, this is what we're going to do. The administration said, to hell with you, and they went ahead and seized sections of the prison. The overthrow was forcibly suppressed by the prison administration, and the leaders were locked up in the segregation unit where they were being brutalized. How prisoners were being brutalized? One prisoner named Carl Hart had a riot baton shoved up his rectum, causing a 5-inch tear to his anterior, I don't know what it is, but anyway, it ripped his butt open. They sent word out to the streets that what was happening to them, and we responded by this time we were pretty much underground. We responded by breaking into the headquarters of the Department of Corrections here in Olympia and placing a 6-inch diameter pipe bomb under the director's desk. It went off at 1 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was harmed, but it did structural damage to the 5-story building. We issued a communique saying that the reason this was done was because of the prisoners in the segregation unit at Walla Walla being brutalized by their captors. I'll tell one more story and then turn it back over to Mark. I was eventually locked up at Walla Walla as a result of, as Mark said, participating in armed bank appropriations after a shootout with police. And I was placed immediately in the hole because having been accused of bombing the Department of Corrections, that made me kind of popular on the inside. So